Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
And what would you do if your own children betrayed you for money? I lived in the house I had built with my own hands. But after my wife died, my children decided I was in their way. We'll make better use of your money, they said as they sent me off to a nursing home. What they didn't know was one little detail. 30 years ago, I had bought stocks for $30,000, and now that portfolio was worth 250 million pesos. When my children accidentally stumbled upon a statement from my brokerage account, my name is Carlos Mendoza. I'm 75 years old, and never in my life did I imagine I would be telling this story. A story of how your own children can betray you so cruelly that it feels like your heart is being torn apart. And yet, at the same time, it's a story of justice. Justice that sometimes comes from where you least expect it. It all began last spring, or rather, it ended then. But in truth, it had started much earlier, probably right after my wife Rosario passed away 4 years ago. That's when my children, Alejandro, 42, and Isabel, 39, began to look at me differently. Not as the father who raised them, educated them, and gave them a future, but as a burden. Yes, that's the word. A burden living in a large house, irrationally spending the family's money. Our house stood in a good neighborhood, a 2-story home with a garden. I built it in the early 90s when I started my construction business after the economic crisis. Rosario and I poured our hearts into it. Every corner was designed and arranged with love. It was the house our children grew up in, the house of birthdays and Christmases. After Rosario's death, I lived there alone, but I was content. Every object held memories. I tended the garden, hosted friends, and sometimes my grandchildren came over. Valentina, Alejandro's daughter, and Diego, Isabel's son. Yes, the house was big for one man, but it was my house. Ours, mine, and Rosario's. At first, the children only hinted. Alejandro would say, "Papa, isn't it too much for you, living alone in such a big house? Maybe you should think about something smaller." Then Isabel would add, "And it's expensive to maintain. The heating, the cleaning, the repairs, and you're retired." I didn't pay much attention. I thought they were just worried about me in their own way. My pension was decent. I had worked as the director of a construction firm, and Rosario left some savings. The house was paid for, no debt. I could very well afford to live in it. But the hints grew more persistent. By last autumn, they openly said I needed to optimize expenses and make a rational decision. Alejandro even found some smaller apartments. "Papa, look at this wonderful 3-bedroom in a new building." He showed me pictures on his phone. Everything nearby: supermarket, clinic, pharmacy, concierge, intercom, safe, and best of all, no worries about a big house. "Alex, I don't want to move anywhere. I'm fine here. This is my home." "But Papa, be realistic. You're 75. What if something happens to you? Who will find you in this huge house? In an apartment, there are neighbors, a concierge." Isabel supported him. "Papa, we care about you. And besides, forgive me for being blunt, but the house is worth a lot. If you sold it and bought something smaller, there'd be plenty of money left. You could live comfortably and well, it would help us too. Diego will start university soon, and Alex has a mortgage." That's when I first felt something was wrong. There was a tone in my daughter's voice that I didn't like. Not concern, a calculation. "Isa, my children, I understand you have your own worries," I said. "But this is my house. I lived here with your mother for 30 years. I'm not ready to give it up." After that, they dropped the subject for a while. I thought they had accepted my decision. How wrong I was. By winter, things grew tense. They came more often, not just to visit me, but to bring up the house, the irrational use of resources, my stubbornness. "Papa, you're a rational man." Alejandro paced the living room. "Look at it objectively. 350 square meters for one person is absurd. And the upkeep? Air conditioning in summer, taxes, insurance. Alex, I can handle the expenses. For now, but what about later? Prices keep rising, repairs will be needed. Papa, think ahead." Isabel pressed harder. "Papa, I know it's hard for you to part with the house, but think of us. We're your children. We're planning our lives, the future of the grandchildren. Vale wants private dance lessons. That costs money. Diego's university will need paying. And what does my house have to do with that? I asked, though I already knew. It's family capital. You and Mama built it for the family, not for you to spend your last years here alone. Those words struck me to the heart. Spend your last years? As if I were no longer a person, but a burden preventing my children from managing the so-called family capital. By early spring, the atmosphere in the family had grown unbearably tense. My children stopped hiding their irritation with my stubbornness. Their visits became shorter, colder, more formal. The grandchildren came less often. Apparently, their parents had been telling them something. In March came the first serious conflict. I had invited some old friends over to celebrate one of their birthdays. We gathered in the living room, set the table, reminisced about our youth, military service, work. It was noisy, cheerful, just as a birthday among old friends should be. The next day, Alejandro arrived looking displeased. "Papa, the neighbors complained about the noise," he said from the doorway. "What neighbors?" I was surprised. "We've always had a great relationship with them. Just yesterday, Pedro Garcia even brought a bottle of whiskey. Not all neighbors are so understanding. Papa, you can't be hosting gatherings like this. It's a quiet neighborhood. People aren't used to such noise. Alex, it was a birthday party, and we didn't go on till late. Everyone left before 10:30. It's not about how late, it's about you not considering others. Papa, honestly, this is yet another argument in favor of moving. In an apartment, everything would be compact. No reason to invite crowds of guests. Crowds of guests. There were 5 of us, including me. Alejandro, I said firmly, this is my house and I have the right to invite guests. If you don't like it, then don't come. My son looked at me as if I had said something outrageous. Fine, Papa, fine. But sooner or later, you'll have to be realistic. After he left, I sat for a long time in the empty living room, thinking about what was happening to our family. Had Rosario's death really changed everything so much? Or had the children always been this way, only too timid to show their true nature while their mother was alive? Rosario, she would never have allowed them to treat me like this. She always said, Carlos, this house is our fortress. Whatever happens, we will always have our home. How bitter that she never knew who I'd end up defending this fortress from. By April, the children moved to harsher measures. Isabel arrived with a woman in a business suit. Turned out she was a real estate agent. They walked through the entire house, the woman measuring, taking photos, making notes. Isa, what's going on? I asked. Papa, we just want to know the real value of the house for planning. What planning? I already told you I'm not moving anywhere. Papa, be reasonable. We can't wait forever while you think it over. Life doesn't stand still. Vale already needs to choose a dance school. Diego will soon be finishing college. We have to plan the family budget. What family? I couldn't hold back. Your budget is your problem. My house is mine. The agent coughed awkwardly. Maybe I should wait in the car? No, Isabel snapped. Stay. Papa, stop throwing a tantrum. We're your children. We have the right to know what our inheritance is worth. Inheritance? I couldn't believe my ears. Isa, do you hear yourself? I'm still alive, thank God, and I plan to live many more years. Of course, Papa, of course. But planning has to be done in advance. And honestly, you can't live much longer alone in this house. What if you fall and break something? What if you get sick? In an apartment with a concierge and neighbors around, it wouldn't be so dangerous. They valued the house at 30 million pesos. Isabel and Alejandro exchanged glances, as if already dividing that money in their minds. The last straw came in May. I will never forget that day, Monday, May 18th. The day was rainy, and I sat in my study going through old papers. Among them, I found photographs from when we built the house. Rosario in a white dress laying the first stone of the foundation. Me in overalls beside the excavator. How long ago it was, how happy we were. That evening, both children arrived together. It was strange. They usually came separately. Right away, I felt something was wrong. Papa, we need to have a serious talk, Alejandro said, sitting down across from me. Yes, Papa. Isabel added. We've thought it all over and made a decision. What decision? I asked, though my heart was already sinking with dread. Alejandro pulled a folder of documents from his briefcase. We found you a wonderful apartment, a 3-bedroom in a new building, everything nearby. We already spoke with the agent. Our house can be sold for $28 million. The apartment costs 10. That leaves 18 million clear, of which we'll set aside 6 million for you, so you can live comfortably, Isabel added. That's more than enough for many years. And the rest, well, we're your children. We have our own needs, our own plans. I sat in silence, unable to believe what I was hearing. 12 million you want to take for yourselves, I finally managed to say. Papa, don't put it that way, as if we're taking something from you, Alejandro protested. This is an investment in the family's future, in the grandchildren's education, in our well-being. You don't want your children and grandchildren to struggle, do you? I want not to be thrown out of my own house, I shouted, unable to hold back. No one is throwing you out. Isabel put on a look of outrage. We're offering you better conditions, a modern apartment where you'll be comfortable and safe. And if I don't agree? The children exchanged glances. Papa, Alejandro said slowly, we think you're not assessing the situation quite rationally. Maybe age is taking its toll. What are you trying to say? I'm saying there's such a thing as legal incapacity. If a person cannot manage their property reasonably, if they make decisions that harm themselves and their loved ones. My heart nearly stopped. Are you threatening me? I whispered. I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining reality. Papa, we're your children. We love you. We want the best for you. But if you insist on this irrational decision... Alejandro is right, Isabel chimed in. Papa, please understand. We can't just watch you ruin your life and our shared future. If we have to consult specialists to assess your mental health. I realized then these weren't empty threats. They were truly ready to do it, to declare their own father incompetent in order to take control of his property. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Papa. Get out, I screamed. Right now, and don't you dare come back. Fine, Alejandro said coldly, slipping the documents back into the folder. Fine, Papa, but you'll regret this decision. Think it over. You have 1 week. 1 week for what? To agree voluntarily. After that, we'll act differently. They left, slamming the door, and I was left alone in my big house, which suddenly no longer felt like a fortress, but a trap. The next week was a nightmare. I hardly slept, listening to every sound in the night. What if they really tried to have me declared insane? As far as I knew, that required a psychiatrist's report, but with enough money, who knew what strings they could pull? I tried to seek advice from my friends, but realized I couldn't tell anyone the truth. The shame was unbearable, that my own children were ready to betray me for money. My old friend Pedro Garcia noticed something was wrong. Carlos, what's the matter with you? You look pale, worried. It's nothing, Pedro. Problems with the children? What kind of problems? Maybe talking about it would help? I nearly burst into tears. How could I explain that the children I had raised, taught, worried about all my life, now wanted to throw me away like some useless thing? They want me to sell the house and move to a smaller apartment, I said, choosing the least painful way to put it. Well, maybe they're right, Pedro replied unexpectedly. Your house really is very big, and it's hard to manage alone. Even my friends didn't understand. To everyone around me, I was just an old man who didn't want to be reasonable. No one saw the greed, the selfishness, the betrayal behind it all. 3 days after that conversation, Alejandro came by. Alone without Isabel, he looked determined. Papa, time is running out. What's your decision? My decision hasn't changed. This is my house and I'm not moving anywhere. That's a pity. Then we'll move to Plan B. What Plan B? Did you think we didn't have other options? He smirked. Papa, you're a smart man. You must understand that sooner or later, this house will be ours anyway. Why drag it out? What are you talking about? Alejandro pulled new documents from his briefcase. Here's a certificate from a psychiatrist stating that you're not in a condition to adequately evaluate your actions. Here's a petition to the court to have you declared legally incapacitated. Here's a contract with a private nursing home. My hands began to tremble. You've gone mad. No, Papa, you're the one who's gone mad. A normal 75-year-old man wouldn't cling to a 350 square meter house, condemning his children and grandchildren to financial hardship. That shows senile decline, an inability to make rational decisions. What psychiatrist gave such a certificate without even seeing me? Who said he didn't see you? Alejandro smiled. Remember in February when you had problems with blood pressure and Isa insisted on a full checkup? You went to that private clinic. I remembered. Yes, my blood pressure had been unstable, and Isabel insisted on a comprehensive exam. One of the doctors had been very talkative, asking not only about my health, but also about my life, my mood, my plans. I thought he was just a caring physician. You set me up, I whispered. We made sure to obtain an objective medical assessment, Alejandro corrected, and Dr. Perez, a highly qualified psychiatrist, concluded that you show signs of senile dementia and are incapable of making sound decisions regarding property. That's a lie. It's a medical opinion. Papa, this is the last time I offer you a peaceful solution. Agree to move voluntarily. Otherwise, in a week we'll go to court and you'll be placed in the nursing home under guardianship. He left, tossing the copies of the documents onto my desk. I stared at them for a long time, unable to believe my eyes. The medical certificate was properly prepared, with stamps and signatures. It spoke of age-related personality changes, inadequate assessment of situations, a tendency to make irrational decisions, causing harm to both the patient and his family. I understood then, they really could pull this off. They had medical papers, they were my closest relatives, and I was just an elderly, lonely man who irrationally clung to a big house. Whom would the court believe? The following week passed in a fog. I ate almost nothing, slept poorly, pacing through the house like a cornered animal. What could I do? Who could I turn to? I had no proof of their scheming, while their version looked perfectly reasonable. Caring children wanting to ensure their father's comfortable old age. On Friday, they both came, Alejandro and Isabel. With them was a woman carrying a folder of documents. Papa, meet Victoria Ramos, a social worker, Isabel said. She'll help us prepare the paperwork for your move. I'm not moving anywhere, I said, but my voice was shaking. Senor Mendoza, the social worker said gently, your children are very concerned about you. They've found a wonderful place for you to live, where you'll be comfortable and safe. Medical care, meals, activities. I don't want a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, Alejandro corrected. It's a private residence for seniors. Excellent conditions, qualified staff. Paid for with my own money, I said bitterly. With the money from selling the house, Isabel nodded. Papa, understand. We can't let you waste such a fortune maintaining an empty house. That's unreasonable. Victoria Ramos handed me the papers. Senor Mendoza, this is the guardianship agreement. Your children will manage your finances in your best interests. And this is the contract with the residents. It's a wonderful place, believe me. There's a garden, a library, even a swimming pool. I looked at the documents and realized this was the end. The end of my independence, the end of my home, the end of everything. And if I don't sign, then tomorrow we file in court, Alejandro said harshly. Papa, we already have medical certificates and witnesses to your irrational behavior. What witnesses? Neighbors. Remember when you held those noisy gatherings? Marta Sanchez from 3 houses down is very concerned about your behavior. And Ignacio Valdez told us how you shouted at him when he made a comment about the music. That never happened. I had never shouted at anyone. But who would believe me against their words? Sign it, Papa, Isabel said wearily. Don't torment yourself and us. It'll end the same way anyway. Only through court it will be far more humiliating. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled so much I could barely write. I signed the guardianship agreement. I signed the consent for moving into the residence. I signed the power of attorney for the sale of the house. Good job, Papa. Isabel even stroked my hand. You made the right decision. When is the move? I asked hopelessly. Next week, Alejandro said. We've already arranged everything with the moving company. Of course, you'll take your personal belongings with you. And the house? We'll sell it quickly. Buyers are already lined up. So it had all been planned in advance. They had already been looking for buyers, already arranged with the residents, already prepared the paperwork. And all this time, I thought I still had a choice. The Golden Years residence was in the suburbs, 40 kilometers from the city. A beautiful modern building, well-kept grounds, polite staff. As the advertisement said, comfortable old age for your loved ones. My room was small but cozy. A bed, a wardrobe, a table, an armchair, a television. The window overlooked the garden. In principle, it was livable. If you didn't think about the fact that just a week ago, I had my own house with its garden, library, and workshop, the children came to see me off with solemn faces, as though they were doing something noble. "Papa, you'll like it here," Alejandro assured me. "Look at the garden. And in the dining room, they cook healthy food. Very good for you." "Yes, and the people here are interesting," Isabel added. "Former engineers, doctors, teachers. You'll have someone to talk to." And they were right. The people really were interesting. Elderly but still lively men and women, each with their own story. Miguel Rodriguez, a former pilot. Carmen Diaz, a distinguished teacher. Bernardo Fernandez, a design engineer. And almost every one of them had a similar story. Their children had taken care of them, sold their homes and apartments, placed them in the residence with full support. All very civilized, with paperwork, with concern for health and safety. "You know, Don Carlos," Miguel Rodriguez told me once when we were sitting in the garden, "at first I was very hurt by my son. But then I realized, what's the point of being angry? Life is life. The main thing is not to let bitterness eat you up." "How can you not be bitter?" I asked. "My own children threw me out of my home for money. And what now? Will you suffer until your dying day?" Miguel shrugged. "I chose differently. You can live here too. Not good, not bad, just differently." Maybe he was right. Maybe I should accept it, try to build some kind of life in these new conditions. But I couldn't. Every day I thought about my house, the garden I had planted with my own hands, the study filled with books I'd been collecting for half my life. The children visited rarely, once a month on Sundays. They came with polite smiles, asked about my health, told me their news. "Papa, we sold the house," Alejandro announced during one of those visits. "At a good price, even better than the agent's estimate. We got 29 million. And my things? We brought what was necessary here. The rest, well, we had to throw it out. Where would you put so many things in a small room?" Thrown out. My books, photographs, tools, souvenirs from trips with Rosario, thrown away like garbage. "We invested the money in reliable instruments," Alejandro continued. "Some on deposit, some in bonds. The interest will cover your expenses here. And the rest? The rest is untouched for emergencies," Isabel replied, "in case you need expensive treatment or something else." I knew they were lying. The rest was already spent, or soon would be. On Valentina's dance school, on Diego's university, on Alejandro's mortgage, on Isabel's vacation, on anything and everything, except their father. A year passed, a long, dreary year in the residence. I got used to the routine, got to know the other residents, even made a few friends. But inside, the pain still burned. My children had betrayed me, and there was nothing I could do. One morning, the administrator, Laura Martinez, came into my room with a worried look. "Don Carlos, there's a man here to see you. Says he's your broker?" She pronounced the word uncertainly, as if she didn't quite understand its meaning. My broker. I had forgotten all about him. Javier Castillo, with whom I'd worked for many years. What could he want? Probably just some paperwork about my change of address. Yes, let him in," I said. A few minutes later, Javier walked in. A man of about 55, in a good suit, carrying a briefcase. We had known each other for about 10 years, though we met rarely. Mostly we spoke on the phone. "Don Carlos," he shook my hand firmly. "How are you? How's your health? I heard you've moved." "Yes, I've moved," I said dryly. "The children decided it would be better for me here." Javier looked at me carefully but said nothing. I see. Well, I'm here on business. There's an interesting situation with your stocks. What stocks? I asked, puzzled. What do you mean, what stocks? He said, surprised. The ones you bought back in the 90s. Remember? Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Back then they were worth pennies, and now... And then I remembered 1994, the early days of my construction business. Things were going well. I had spare money. A friend who worked at a bank told me about American stocks, said I could buy them cheap, and maybe one day they'd pay off. That year I had bought $30,000 worth of shares. For that time, it was a huge sum, almost a year's income. Rosario scolded me. Carlos, why do you need those American papers? We could have built another floor in the house instead. But I bought them. Apple shares were $1 or $2 a piece, Microsoft 5 or 6. Amazon had just entered the market. Then I forgot all about them. I was building the house, raising children, growing the business. The shares sat quietly in the account, slowly growing in value. So, Javier continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase, you've accumulated quite a serious sum. Apple has grown in price by 300 times, Microsoft by 200, Amazon by 500, plus dividends all these years, plus stock splits. He handed me a statement. I glanced at the figures and nearly fell out of my chair. $12 million. At the current exchange rate, almost 240 million pesos. Is this real? I whispered. Of course it's real. Here are the statements from recent years. Here's the portfolio valuation. Don Carlos, you are a wealthy man. Very wealthy. I sat in silence, trying to digest the information. So while my children were fighting over the miserable 29 million from the sale of the house, I had 240 million pesos in my account, and they had no idea. Javier, why didn't you tell me this earlier? Well, you yourself told me not to bother you with trifles, he said, surprised. Remember, about 5 years ago I called and suggested selling part. The price was good, and you said, let it sit, it'll go to the kids. So I didn't insist. Yes, I remembered. Back then Rosario was still alive, and we planned to leave the children a solid inheritance. I really did tell him not to trouble me with minor things. And why have you come now? Because the situation has changed. First, the sum has become very large. It needs to be diversified. Second, some of the stocks are expected to correct soon. It would be wise to lock in part of the profit. And third, he paused, I heard about your relocation and that your children arranged for guardianship. Yes, they did. Don Carlos, do you understand that if they find out about the stocks, they will be able to control them? As your guardians, they legally have the right to manage all your assets. I hadn't known that. I thought guardianship only covered the house and the savings they already knew about. And what do you suggest? Honestly, sell part of the shares and move the money somewhere safer. It could be registered to a relative you trust or moved to another jurisdiction. There are options. The important thing is to do it before your children find out about the portfolio. And will they definitely find out? Sooner or later? Yes. Tax authorities, banks, the information will surface somewhere. And as guardians, they have the right to request details of all your assets. I thought hard. On the one hand, the stocks were legally mine, bought with honestly earned money. On the other hand, my children had already shown what they were capable of for money. Javier, is there a way to let them know about the stocks, but not right away? What do you mean? For example, so they'd receive a notification, a statement, but only when I want them to. The broker considered this. In principle, yes. We could send copies of the documents to your registered address, officially, to notify the guardians about the ward's assets. When do you want it done? I don't know yet. Give me time to think. All right, but Don Carlos, don't delay too long. The market could turn at any moment. After he left, I sat in my chair for a long time, holding the statement in my hands. Nearly 240 million pesos, a sum that changed everything. I could buy a dozen houses like mine. I could guarantee myself any old age I wanted, even in a palace with servants. I could help my grandchildren. Truly help them, not with scraps from the house sale, but with real money for education, for a start in life. But most importantly, I could show my children exactly whom they had betrayed, the father they considered a burden and cast aside for a few miserable millions. The next few days I hardly slept, turning the situation over in my mind. The anger and bitterness that had been building for more than a year suddenly had an outlet. I was not some helpless old man they could deceive and throw away. I had the resources not only to restore justice, but to teach my children a lesson they would remember for the rest of their lives. But I had to act carefully. As long as they thought I was just a poor pensioner under guardianship, I had the advantage. They were relaxed, squabbling over pennies, expecting no surprises. I decided to start with reconnaissance. I called Alejandro. Alex, how are you? How are the kids? Papa, everything's fine. Vale got into music school. She's playing piano. Diego's preparing for university. We hired tutors. Expensive, I suppose. Yes, of course, but we're managing. Part of the money from the house went to the kids. Part we set aside. Papa, how are you? Everything all right at the residence? Yes, I've gotten used to it. Listen, Alex, could you all come this weekend? I've been feeling a bit lonely. Of course, Papa. We'll come Saturday, the whole family. On Saturday, they really did come. Alejandro with his wife Carolina and daughter Valentina, Isabel with her son Diego. Even the grandchildren looked well off. Stylish clothes, Vale with a new phone, Diego in expensive sneakers. Abuelo, hello! Valentina hugged me. How are you? I recently gave a concert at the music school. Do you want me to play for you? Of course, my dear. We went to the residence hall where there was a piano. Vale really played beautifully. It was clear she was training seriously. The costly lessons were paying off. Well done, I said. Is the music school expensive? Yes, not cheap, Alejandro chimed in. But what can you do? Good education costs money. And just look at the result. And how's Diego doing? I'm doing great, Abuelo, my grandson answered. This year I'm taking my final exams. Then I want to get into university. Mom says it's important to make good connections there. University must be costly? Yes, but Alejandro and I decided children must be given the best, Isabel said. Of course, we had to spend part of your money, but the grandchildren will get an education. Part of my money? They exchanged glances. Well, Papa, technically it's the money from selling your house, Alejandro said cautiously. But we spent it on family needs, on the children. You don't mind, do you? And if I did mind? Papa, why ask such questions? Isabel snapped. We're your children. The grandchildren are your grandchildren. Isn't it better that the money goes toward their future instead of lying idle? And how much is left from the house sale? Again, they exchanged glances. Carolina, Alejandro's wife, carefully studied her nails. Well, honestly, not much, Alejandro finally said. Vale's school, Diego's tutors, my mortgage. We bought a car for Isa. But the most important thing, there's enough to cover your expenses here and a little left in reserve. How much? Papa, why do you need the numbers? Isabel said irritably. We spend everything reasonably, in your best interest. How much? I repeated more firmly. About 1.5 million left, Alejandro admitted reluctantly. But that's enough for many years. From 29 million, in 1 year they had spent 27.5 on children's schooling, on their own needs, on their investment in the family's future. And they left me 1.5 million to live out the rest of my days. I see, I said. And if I need expensive treatment? Papa, don't think about bad things, Carolina said quickly. You still have many years ahead of you. But if I do? Well, we'll figure something out, Alejandro said uncertainly. Maybe take a loan. So if I got seriously ill, they'd borrow money at interest just to avoid spending their own. Wonderful children, so very caring. All right, let's not dwell on sad things, I said. Tell me how you're doing. Alex, are you paying off the mortgage? Yes, trying. The interest is biting, but with your help, it's going faster. And you, Isa, you bought a car? Yes, Papa, I told you already. I got a BMW. Comfortable, reliable. Expensive? Well, 3 million, but it was worth it. 3 million for a car, a tenth of the money from my house. And she already had a car, just an older one. We talked a little longer, then they got ready to leave. The grandchildren hugged me goodbye, and the children promised to visit again in a month. Papa, don't be upset that little money is left, Isabel said as she left. The important thing is that you're safe, under supervision. Money isn't the most important thing in life. Not the most important thing, said by the daughter who spent 3 million from my legacy on a car. After they left, I sat in the garden for a long time thinking. No, they hadn't changed. They didn't realize they had done wrong. On the contrary, they saw themselves as caring children who had wisely managed their father's money. And if I told them about the stocks, they would spend them the same way, convinced it was the right thing to do. So I had to act differently. The next day I called my broker again. Javier, I've made a decision. I'm listening. I want to sell half the stocks and buy property. A house, a good house. Don Carlos, but what about guardianship? Your children could block the deal. Not if they don't know about it. Can it be arranged through a trustee and then transferred to me? In principle, yes, but it's complicated. Javier, I'm willing to pay well for good work. Find a way. A week later, he called back. It's all arranged. There's an option through an offshore company which will purchase the house and then pass it to you for management. Formally, you won't be the owner, but the manager, yet in practice, the full master. Excellent. And have you found a house? Yes, in the same neighborhood where you lived. Even better than your old one. Larger, more modern, with a swimming pool. The owner needs to sell quickly. The price is good. $8 million. $8 million. More than 160 million pesos. A figure that would make my children faint when they found out. Buy it. The deal took a month to finalize. I sold half the stocks, Apple and Microsoft, and received $12 million. 8 I spent on the house, 2 on furnishing and renovation, 2 I kept for current expenses. The house turned out to be truly luxurious, a 3-story villa in an elite district with a swimming pool, sauna, wine cellar, and a garage for 4 cars. 2 hectares of landscaped grounds. The previous owner had gone bankrupt and was selling urgently, so the price was below market value. While the paperwork was being finalized, I prepared for the move. I told the residence staff that I was going to distant relatives for rehabilitation. No one was particularly surprised. Wealthy old men sometimes did that. I hired a house manager, Antonio Ramirez, a former military man, a capable fellow in his 50s. He was to oversee the property while I was temporarily away. Officially, the house belonged to the offshore company, and Antonio was its representative in Argentina. I also hired a housekeeper, a cook, and a driver. If I was going back to normal life, then I was going to do it in full. At the end of October, I moved into my new home. The feeling was indescribable. After a year in the residence, after the humiliation and dependence on my children, I was once again the master of my own life. A wealthy master, able to indulge any whim. The first thing I did was set up my study, bought new books to replace the ones they'd thrown out, hung photographs of Rosario on the walls. Then I turned to the garden. I hired a landscape designer to plant a rose garden in memory of my wife. But above all, I prepared for the meeting with my children, for the moment when they would learn the truth. In November, 2 months after my disappearance, I decided the time had come. I called Javier. It's time. Send them the statement. Where to? To the residence address. Let them pass it on to my children as guardians. Don Carlos, are you sure? They'll start looking for you. Let them. I'm not hiding. I just want to see their faces when they realize what they've lost. The next day, the brokerage sent a package of documents to the residence. Account statements, portfolio reports, a notice requiring decisions on asset management. Everything done by the book. Since the children were legal guardians, they had both the right and the duty to be informed of all the ward's assets. 2 days later, the director of the residence called me, flustered. Don Carlos, your children came by. They were in shock. They demanded your address, said something about stocks, about millions. I didn't understand, but they were very insistent. And what did you tell them? What could I say? That you left for rehabilitation with relatives, and I don't know the address. They left their phone numbers, asked me to contact them urgently if you appeared. Good. If they come again, tell them I'll get in touch. That evening, Alejandro called me. His voice was strange, shaken, almost frightened. Papa? Papa, is that you? Yes, Alex. How are you? Papa, where are you? We've been looking for you. At the residence, they said you left. Yes, I'm not there now. Why? What happened? Papa, we received some documents about your stocks. The sums are incredible. Is it true? What sums? Papa, it says you have stocks worth nearly 160 million pesos. That's impossible. Why impossible? Well, how? Where would you get that kind of money? We knew all your property, the house, the savings. Not everything, apparently. Papa, but this is... He stumbled. Papa, where are you? We need to meet, right away. This is very important. Important in what way, Alex? Well, if you really have that kind of money, then everything changes. We didn't know. If we had known... If you had known... What? Then we wouldn't have sold the house, wouldn't have put you in the residence. Papa, we thought you no longer had the means to live properly. There it was. Now that they knew about the money, suddenly they had been caring for me all along. Suddenly selling the house had been out of good intentions. Alex, and what if there had been no money? If all I'd had was my pension? What do you mean? I mean, was it right to throw me out of my house for 29 million? Silence. Long, heavy silence. Papa, we were thinking of your safety. Alex, out of 29 million from the house, you left me 1.5. The rest, 27.5. You spent on yourselves. Was that caring for my safety? Papa, but we spent it on the children, on the grandchildren, on their education, on the grandchildren. 300,000 for the music school, another 300,000 for Diego's tutors, and the other 26 million. Where did they go? Again, silence. Papa, let's meet and discuss this calmly. Tell us where you are. We'll come. Why? What do you mean, why? We need to sort out the stocks. That kind of money can't just sit there. It needs to be managed properly. Ah, yes. Now the money can't just sit there. Now it has to be managed properly. A year ago, I had to be managed properly, placed in a nursing home under supervision. Alex, I can manage the stocks myself. But Papa, you're under guardianship. Formally, we're responsible for all your financial decisions. There it was, the real reason they wanted an urgent meeting, to claim rights to my portfolio as guardians. Alex, what if I want to revoke the guardianship? Papa, why complicate things? We're family. Better that we meet, talk everything through. Papa, at least tell me what city you're in. Monterrey. And the address? Not yet. I need time to think. Papa, but... I hung up. Half an hour later, Isabel called. Her voice was pleading, almost tearful. Papa, dear, what's happening? Alex told me you had some stocks. Papa, why didn't you tell us? Why would I? What do you mean, why? We're your children. We have to know your financial situation. We worry about you. Isa, a year ago you said to me, Papa will make better use of your money. Do you remember? But we didn't know you had so much money. And if you had, well, then of course everything would have been different. So if I have hundreds of millions, I'm a rational man to consult with. But if I only have a 30 million peso house, then I'm a senile old fool to be locked away in a nursing home? Papa, why are you saying that? We cared about you. Cared. Out of 29 million, you left me 1.5. But the rest went to family needs, to the children. To the children, you spent less than 1 million. And the rest? Silence. Papa, let's not fight. Let's meet and calmly discuss everything. We'll fix our mistakes. What mistakes? Well, we'll bring you home. Buy you a new house, even better than the old one. With your money, of course. With my money, of course. Issa, can you bring back the old house? What? Oh, no, probably not. New owners live there now. I see. And my things, my books, photographs? Papa, we didn't know they mattered to you. We thought in a new life it'd be better to start fresh. A fresh start in a nursing home. Not a nursing home, thus a good residence, she protested. Papa, stop reproaching us. We only wanted what's best for you. Wanted, I'm hanging up, Issa. I need time to think. Papa, wait, at least tell us where you are. I ended the call and removed the SIM card. Enough. Let them stew in their own juice for now. The following days I spent reflecting. My children knew about the stocks, were panicking, searching for me, but I wasn't rushing to meet them. I wanted them to feel the situation deeply, and it was indeed unpleasant for them. According to the paperwork, they were my guardians, responsible for safeguarding my assets. And the assets turned out to be 1,000 times greater than they thought. And they had lost them because I had vanished along with the $1 million portfolio. What's more, as guardians, they were obliged to submit regular reports to the guardianship board on how my money was being spent. And they had spent $27.5 million of my 29, most of it on themselves. If the authorities took an interest in that, I decided to make them more nervous. Through a lawyer acquaintance, I filed an anonymous report with the guardianship office about violations by the Mendoza guardians. Claimed that the ward had disappeared and they were spending his money for personal use. The effect was immediate. A week later, Alejandro and Isabel were summoned by the Guardianship Council to give explanations. I found out from the residence director, who told me the children had called again. Don Carlos, your children came again. They're in very bad shape. Nervous, frightened. They say they have been summoned by some officials, asked for explanations. What's going on? Nothing special, just justice being restored. They begged me to tell you they're ready for any terms, as long as you agree to meet. They mentioned compensation. Compensation. Interesting. Seems it had dawned on them how serious this was. I decided it was time to make contact. I bought a new SIM card and sent them a message from a new number. Want to meet? Come tomorrow at 3 p.m. to Café La Biela in Recoleta. Come alone, without wives or children. The replies came instantly from Alejandro. Papa, thank God, of course we'll come. Thank you for agreeing. From Isabel, Papa, dear, we'll be there. We'll make everything right, we promise. At the appointed time, I sat at a window table in Café La Biela. I was dressed well. A fine suit, Swiss watch, Italian shoes. I did not look like a poor pensioner from a nursing home, but like a wealthy man accustomed to comfort. The children arrived right at 3. They walked into the cafe and looked around in confusion, clearly not expecting to see me like this. I waved to them. Papa! Isabel rushed over to hug me. We've been searching for you. How are you feeling? Where are you living? I feel fine, I said, responding coolly to her embrace. And I live well. Alejandro hugged me too, but less emotionally. Papa, you look great. And your clothes, expensive. Where did you get that suit? I bought it. With what money? Isabel blurted out. With my own. They sat down across from me. Both looked tired, worried. Isabel wore no makeup. Rare for her. Alejandro kept adjusting his tie, a sure sign of nerves. Papa, Alejandro began, we need to talk seriously. About those stocks. What about them? Well, they really are worth almost 160 million pesos. That was their value at the time of the statement. Stock prices change every day. My God, Isabel whispered. Papa, why didn't you tell us? Why should I have? What do you mean, why? We would have done everything differently. Differently how? They exchanged glances. Well, we wouldn't have sold the house, Alejandro said. Wouldn't have put you in the residence. You could have lived as you wanted. So if a man has money, he deserves respect. And if he doesn't, you can dump him in a nursing home? Papa, it's not like that. Then how? Silence. Papa, Isabel finally said, we understand we acted wrongly. We're ready to make it right. Tell us what we need to do. First, tell me where the 27.5 million from the house sale went. Again, they exchanged glances. Papa, we spent it on family needs. Specifically, Alejandro pulled out his phone, checked something. Well, my mortgage, 8 million, I paid it off early. Issa's car, 3 million. Vale's music school, 200,000. Diego's tutors, 300,000. My family's vacation in Miami, 500,000. Issa's vacation in Europe, 700,000. Renovation in my apartment, 2 million. Issa's renovation too, 1.5 million. He kept listing, and the sum grew. It turned out less than 1 million had gone to the grandchildren, and the rest to their own needs. Paying off loans, luxury vacations, renovations, cars, and various other expenses, Alejandro concluded. In short, it all went to the family. To the family that apparently didn't include me. Papa, how can you say that? Isabel protested. You're our father. Of course you were included. Then why did you send me to a residence? We thought it would be better for you. Better than in my own home? Safer. Alex, Issa, I said sternly, stop lying. To yourselves and to me. You wanted my house. You needed money for a mortgage, for vacations, for renovations, and I stood in the way. That's why you got rid of me. That's not true, Emma. Then how? Explain to me how spending 27 million out of 29 on yourselves while leaving your father 1.5 million to live out his days was care for the family? They sat silent, eyes lowered. And now that you've discovered I have more money, you want to correct your mistake? Papa, we really do want to make things right, Isabel said quietly. Tell us what it takes. For a start, end the guardianship. What? Alejandro looked up. But why? We could just change the terms. What terms? Well, you'd live wherever you want, spend whatever you want, and we'd remain your guardians, just formally, for appearances. I understood. They were afraid of losing control over the $1 million portfolio. No, I said firmly. Either you remove the guardianship or we have no deal. But Papa, Alejandro pleaded, that kind of money without oversight, what if someone cheats you? What if scammers, and that worries you? Of course, you're our father. A year ago, you were ready to have me declared incompetent to take away a house worth 30 million, and now you worry someone might cheat me out of millions? That was different. How? He had no answer. All right, I said. I'll give you 1 week to decide. Either you voluntarily revoke the guardianship and return what's left of my money, or I go to court to have the guardianship annulled and sue you for damages. What damages? The 27 million you spent on yourselves instead of providing for my old age with dignity. But you have the stocks now. The stocks are one thing. Accountability for embezzling awards funds is another. They turned pale. Papa, Alejandro whispered, you wouldn't take your own children to court? I will if we can't settle this peacefully. But we're your children? You are my children. But a year ago, that didn't stop you when you decided to put me in a nursing home. I stood up from the table. You have 1 week. You know my number. Hey, Papa, wait. Isabel grabbed my hand. Where are you living? Can we come to you? Number. Not until we reach an agreement. But why? Because I don't trust you. The following days, the children called me constantly. Sometimes they begged me to soften the conditions. Sometimes they threatened. Sometimes they cried. But I was unyielding. Either full termination of the guardianship or court. Finally, on Thursday, Alejandro gave in. All right, Papa, we agree. We'll file a petition to end the guardianship. And you'll return the remaining money? Yes, though there's not much left. How much? 800,000. Out of 1.5 million, they had managed to burn through 700,000 in just a week. Probably panicked, buying expensive gifts for me. Fine, and one more condition. What condition? I want to meet with the grandchildren. Speak to them honestly, without you present. Why? Because they have a right to know the truth about what happened. Papa, why drag the children into this? Alex, you already dragged them in when you spent my money on their education. Let them know who really paid for music school and tutors. He was silent for a moment. All right, when? Saturday, bring them to the Japanese garden. Only them, without you. On Saturday, I waited for the grandchildren on a bench in the Japanese garden. They arrived together. Valentina, 16, and Diego, 17. Both looked confused and frightened. Abuelo, Valentina hugged me. Dad and Aunt Isabel said you wanted to talk to us. About what? First, sit down. This will be a long talk. They sat beside me. My children, I want to tell you a story about what's been happening in our family these past 2 years. And I told them everything. How after their grandmother's death, their parents pressured me to sell the house. How they threatened to declare me incompetent. How they moved me into a residence. How they spent 27 out of 29 million on themselves. The children listened with their mouths open. Abuelo, Diego finally said, is that true? Did Dad and Aunt Isabel really do that? It's true, my boy. But they told us you wanted to move to the residence yourself. They said that, and you believed it. Valentina began to cry. Abuelo, I didn't know. I thought you really were better off there. And when I asked why we didn't visit often, Dad said you got tired of guests. Don't cry, girl. None of this is your fault. But my piano, my school, she sobbed. That was with your money? Not only, the school isn't that expensive, $200,000 a year, but the other 26 million went to different things. Like what? Diego asked. Paying off your father's mortgage, your mother's car, renovations, vacations. So we're living on money stolen from you, Diego said slowly. Not stolen, spent improperly. I was under their guardianship. They were supposed to spend my money on my needs. Instead, they spent it on theirs. And now, Valentina asked, Dad says you still have lots of money. I do, and now I'll manage it myself. Abuelo, Diego said quietly, are you angry at us for not knowing, for staying silent? No, my boy, you're children. Parents don't always tell you the truth, but now you know, and I want you to decide for yourselves how to see it. And what do you want from us? Valentina asked. I want nothing, only that you know the truth, and that you understand. If I don't treat your parents too warmly now, it's not out of spite. Abuelo, Diego said firmly, can I come to you? Without my parents, I'm ashamed of what they did. Me too, Valentina added quickly. I want to apologize and play piano for you. Not what they teach me at school, but what you want to hear. My heart trembled. So not all was lost. Children are still children. They can understand and forgive. Of course you can. I'll give you my address. Just don't tell your parents where I live yet. Where do you live? Valentina asked curiously. In a big house with a garden and a pool. Bought with the money our parents didn't know about. Yes. Can we see it? Of course. Come tomorrow after school. The grandchildren came the next day. When they saw the house, their eyes went wide. Abuelo, it's huge, Valentina exclaimed. And beautiful. Like a palace. And a real pool, Diego added. Abuelo, you live like a millionaire now. More or less like a millionaire, I smiled. I showed them the house, the garden, introduced them to Antonio Ramirez. Valentina marveled at the grand piano in the music room, Diego at the gym and billiard hall. Do our parents know you live like this? Diego asked. Number, and they don't need to. Why not? Because until we reach a final agreement, I don't want them knowing the details. We spent a wonderful evening. Valentina played the piano. Diego told me about his plans for university. I realized how much I had missed talking with them. Abuelo, Valentina said before leaving, can I come visit you sometimes, just to talk? Of course, children, come whenever you want. And our parents. With your parents, things are complicated for now, but that's not your fault. After they left, I reflected for a long time. The grandchildren turned out to be intelligent, fair-minded kids. A pity their parents hadn't grown up the same way. A few more days passed. Alejandro and Isabel filed the paperwork to revoke the guardianship and return the remaining money, those $800,000. Formally, we had an agreement, but our relationship remained cold. They asked several times to visit me, but I refused. I wasn't ready yet for normal contact. On Thursday evening, Alejandro called. His voice was strange, both agitated and confused. "Papa, can we come see you? We need to talk urgently." "About what?" About your stocks. Something happened." "What exactly?" "Papa, better in person. It's hard to explain over the phone." "Interesting. What else could have happened with my stocks?" "All right, come tomorrow at 6 in the evening." "Can we come today?" "Tomorrow." The next day at 6, the intercom rang. Alejandro and Isabel stood at the gate, looking lost. I let them in. When they stepped into the house and saw the furnishings, their expressions grew even more bewildered. "Papa," Isabel whispered, "what is this?" "My house." "But it's worth a fortune." "It is." "What did you buy it with?" "Part of the money from selling stocks." They exchanged glances. "Papa," Alejandro said, "we need to talk. Today we got a new statement from your broker. And the balance, it changed. Stocks rise and fall every day. What's unusual about that?" "Papa, it says you sold half the portfolio for $12 million. "Yes, I did." "When?" 2 months ago." "And where's the money?" "Part I spent on the house, part I set aside for living expenses." Isabel collapsed into a chair. "Papa," she groaned, "do you realize how much money that is?" "I do. $12 million. "And you spent it." "Not spent, invested in real estate. A house is worth money too." "But you could have consulted us," Alejandro stammered. "Consult you?" I smirked. "A year ago, you considered me an incompetent old man, and now you want me to consult you about investments? But such money, my money, I'll use it as I see fit." "And the remaining stocks?" Isabel asked. "They're still there, growing in value. Amazon and Google are doing well." "How much are they worth now?" "At the last statement, 120 million pesos. But prices change daily." They sat in silence, processing. At last, Alejandro lifted his head. "Papa, and do we get nothing?" There it was, the real question. Not how's your health, not do you need help, but do we get something? "And you want something?" "Well, we're your children. Children who threw me out of my house and spent my money on yourselves. But we corrected it. We lifted the guardianship, returned the rest. You corrected it after learning the size of my fortune." "Papa, we didn't know. And if you had, would you have acted differently?" "Of course. So rich parents deserve good treatment, but poor ones can be sent to a nursing home?" They were silent. "I'll answer your question," I said calmly. "I'll make a will. The majority will go to the grandchildren, for education, to start their lives. They weren't guilty in any of this. And us? You'll get exactly what you left me a year ago. 1.5 million between the two of you." "1.5 million?" Isabel shrieked. "Out of 600 million? "Out of 600. The rest, to charity, to the grandchildren, to friends, to people who didn't betray me." "But that's unfair." "Unfair? Was it fair when you spent 27 million out of 29 on yourselves?" "But we corrected it." "Corrected it when it became profitable? And if it hadn't?" "Papa," Isabel pleaded, "give us a chance. We can be good children. You could have always been, but you chose money." I stood up. "That's enough, my children. The conversation is over. Live your lives. I'll live mine." "Papa, wait." Alejandro jumped up. "Maybe we can change. Prove we've changed?" "I doubt it, but you can try." "How?" "I don't know. Figure it out. You have time. I'm not so old. I may live another 20 years. They left, crushed, and I remained in my beautiful house knowing that justice had finally been served. A year has passed. I live in my home, enjoying comfort and independence. The grandchildren visit often. We've become true friends. Valentina entered the conservatory. I paid. Diego entered university. My doing as well. But unlike their parents, they are sincerely grateful and don't take my help for granted. The children, Alejandro and Isabel, try to mend relations, but it doesn't work. Too much resentment remains, too deep the wounds. Sometimes they come with the grandchildren. We speak politely, but coldly. They realize they lost hundreds of millions because of their own greed and foolishness. If 2 years ago, they had simply shown normal human care, let me stay in my home, not tried to strip me bare, everything would have been different. I would have left them most of the fortune, helped them in life, rejoiced in their successes. But they chose the easy way, to discard the old man and divide his property. And they received a lesson they'll never forget. Recently, Javier told me my portfolio had grown again. The remaining stocks now worth 140 million. Amazon and Google proved the forecast right. I think about how to handle this money, most of course, to the grandchildren, part to charity, to help other lonely elders abandoned by their children for an inheritance. And to my children, I'll leave a token sum and a note. Remember, you must be kind to your parents, not because they have money, but because they are your parents. Maybe one day they'll learn that lesson, but it will already be too late. Still, they have time. I'm healthy, strong, living a full life. And who knows, maybe they'll yet manage to prove they've truly changed, not for money, but for the sake of the relationship itself. We'll see. I still have many years ahead.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.